Hello, and welcome to this special edition of Greater Somerville. I'm Joe Lynch. Along with my co-host from Greater Somerville, Kyan Anderson, we're pleased to present this special edition of Greater Somerville talking about the month of May, which is Bike Month across the nation, as well as here in Somerville. We're pleased to welcome our guests, Hayes Morrison from the City of Somerville's Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, and Sergeant James Rooney from the Somerville Police Department. The month of May is traditionally Bike Month across the nation, and we will be marking the occasion here in Somerville with a series of bike shows here at SCAT TV. Our conversation today will center on Somerville's bike safety measures, new initiatives, rules of the road for bike safety, and the city's increased enforcement measures related to bicyclists, pedestrians, and motorists. Hayes, Sergeant Rooney, thank you so much for taking time out of your day and coming down here to SCAT TV.
Sure.
Hayes, we're going to start with you if you don't mind. If you could just describe for some of the folks at home the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure and why this bike initiative stuff falls under your department.
Sure. The Department of Transportation and Infrastructure handles quite a bit of activity in the city of Somerville. We do open space planning and, as it pertains to this initiative, transportation planning. And so anything that has to do with increasing the awareness or the amount of facilities associated with bicycle and pedestrian planning falls to our office. So it's a natural fit that we would come and talk to you about the bike safety education campaign ongoing in the city right now.
Great. Thank you. Sergeant Rooney, we've had some little bit of controversy about the enforcement of some of the rules of the road, but tell us a little bit about the Somerville Police Department and how it's now your responsibility to be the spokesman for some of those enforcement.
Well, I'm the sergeant in charge of the Somerville Police Traffic Unit, and our primary duties are to investigate traffic crashes and to enforce traffic laws. And I suppose our increased enforcement is kind of twofold, the reasoning. One is, as we can all see, with the increased number of bicyclists on the road, more bicyclists on the road mean more traffic accidents. And so on the one hand, it's to try and reduce car crashes or traffic accidents. And the second hand is the law that we actually enforce, which is Chapter 8511B, the bicycle law, is a law that's been on the book for decades. It's nothing new. What is new is that the legislature recently changed the law to allow us to use the regular traffic citations or traffic tickets that we write to use those to enforce 8511B. Prior to that, we had no ticket to give out, so we really couldn't enforce it.
Great.
So it's kind of a twofold reason.
Great. So we're going to go back and forth between Kyan and I. We're going to try to formulate and frame this for the residents of the city. I know that many people have seen over the past few years the city's increased lane markings on roadways out there in Somerville. So if you could, let me ask one question. Are those lane markings, can those only be put on certain roadways within the city?
Well, the city prefers to do for a bike lane, a 5-foot bike lane if at all possible. So it has to be able to fit within the roadway, not constraining the travel lane for the vehicle or the parking lane. So in that way it is constrained. But other than that, no. And then we have to have a 3-foot ability for Sharrow, and that's just our city stance.
And Hayes, one more quick one on the Sharrows.
Sure.
Sharrows, being a word that a lot of us are familiar
okay.
with, are the lane markings on the roadways that you see that indicate that's a bike lane.
Right. No, well, actually, a Sharrow doesn't have to indicate a bike lane. It can also just be a share the road symbol. And I'm
Okay.
sorry to use Sharrow.
It's a very trendy word
yeah,
right now.
exactly.
That's
I
okay.
get very into industry speak, and I shouldn't say that. But that is the double arrow with the bicyclist,
Okay.
and that's a Sharrow.
Okay.
So it's not a designated bike lane
Lane.
per se, but it's where when limitations don't allow you to actually have a full-on bike lane. So people, I actually think that there's a little bit to it because people, you have to be alert. I think in a designated bike lane, sometimes bicyclists tend to think, well, this is my space. And I think it's really about making the cars and the bikes work together.
So we've increased on our roadways the awareness for motorists to be cognizant of the fact that we've seen an enormous increase in the number of bicyclists in the city. And I see it first thing in the morning with people commuting back and forth between Cambridge, Boston, and elsewhere. And I'm sure the Somerville Police Department, out in the cruiser, out in the bikes, the police department itself has its own crew of bicycling policemen.
Officers on bicycle, yes.
Right, right. So we're aware of it. But now this increase to motorists who may just be passing through the city. That's one of the keys, too, is to make sure they understand that you have to share the road with bicyclists.
Well, the rule is, or the saying goes, same rights, same rules. And as Sergeant Rooney was saying, it is Massachusetts general law that the bicyclist abides by the same rules and the same laws, and all motorists in the Commonwealth should be aware of that as well.
So can I just ask my first question, because Joe, I just want to jump in here for a second. Where can people find these rules? If they just go ahead and Google, you'd mentioned the Section 11B, Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 85, Section 11B, or is it on the city's website, so the people are aware exactly what they should be and should not be doing in order to avoid a ticket?
I think the best way would be to just, if you go on any type of search engine like Google or Yahoo, if you just put in 85-11B, which that's actually the Chapter
Okay.
85, Section 11B, in Massachusetts, within seconds, you'll get a link that'll take you right to the state's website, and you can read the actual statute.
Of what
I'm
you
always a big fan of reading the actual statute, not what someone's interpretation of
Yep.
what the statute is, which may not be a correct interpretation. So by doing that, 85-11B and just Massachusetts,
You should
that'll
be able
take
to pull
you.
it
It'll
up.
take you right to the actual chapter and section, and that spells everything out.
I think it's very helpful.
Good question, Cayenne, and let's go back to Hayes for 1 minute in terms of it's always beneficial for someone to know the rules of the road before they get on a bike.
Right.
And I know that your department works very closely with the Somerville Bike Committee.
Right.
And for those who don't know, the Somerville Bike Committee is a sanctioned city
It is a city
committee.
subcommittee, yes.
And they are appointed by the mayor and approved
yes.
by the Board of Aldermen
They-
to
they
be
are.
on this committee. So can you describe a little bit what influence these folks have and what kind of educational outreach that they do for the general public?
Well, sure. They're a committee, and all members are approved by the Board of Aldermen and the mayor. They meet once monthly, and right now, one of the major outreach campaigns that they're doing is this bike safety campaign, which is culminated in 12 different posters that we're going to push through the city as we kind of go into the spring and the super biking time of year.
Sure.
They also do much more than that. They really are
They're
conduit.
advocates.
They're a conduit to the
Yeah.
bicycle committee, and there's a strong bicycle committee in Somerville, and they do a great job of representing that interest at all levels within the city. They're great to work with.
And in addition to that, there are also statewide organizations.
Oh, yes.
Mass Bike and a lot of organizations that do the outreach to the bicycle community. And
Yep.
basically says, Somerville's not the only community to start enforcing a lot of stuff that's on the rules. There are a lot of other communities. Sergeant Rooney, you can probably speak to this. I've seen it happen in Boston, where the Boston police are starting to cite bicyclists for infractions. Cambridge is doing the same thing.
Yes.
And it only makes sense. From a public safety standpoint, bicyclists blowing through red lights or stop signs or endangering motorists or endangering pedestrians need to be aware. But that's why Cayenne's question of where do you find out? For the new person getting on a bike, maybe an adult.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think if you go to the chapter that we were talking about, but also, too, I think, Hayes, that's a great point with the bicycle committee. I think they're a wealth of knowledge of all the things going around regarding the bike community, because there is quite a strong biking community in Somerville, and it's growing even stronger. So that's available on the city's website, correct? So that
Right.
people can get in touch with some of those people to find out more about what's going on in Somerville.
Not only that, they're helping to organize, or they actually are organizing, several Bike Week events. So not only is May Bike Month, but there's also Bike Week, which is May 14th through the 20th. And the most interesting event, I'm going to take that back. One of the kind of, I guess, most interesting is a bike race. Who will win? T versus car versus cyclist.
Oh, I
from
saw that.
Davis into into Kendall Square, and that'll take place on Monday the 14th. Tom Champion's going to be, the voice of Somerville is going to announce. So we think that's going to be a lot of fun. And I have no idea who's going to win.
There you go. There you
Depends on how
go.
fast you ride. Joe, you ride pretty fast, right? You're pretty.
I have
Quick on your bike.
learned over the years that it is not a good idea to try to beat any vehicle on the road. It's a hard lesson to learn, but I've come to realize, and Sergeant Rooney, you're chuckling at me, that when it comes to who's going to win that battle between a bicyclist and a vehicle, the vehicle always usually wins.
Well, that's right. I always remember when I was a kid, there was this sign up in the Pothouse Rotary, and it said, "You may be right, but don't be dead right."
Right.
And it's like, you may be the one in the right, but
That's
is
a
it
good point.
worth going
Right.
to that point to be
Right.
laying in a hospital bed
Right.
to prove that?
Well,
Right.
the question that I have is that I think with the uptick in the bicycle community and bicyclists on the road, and then with this upcoming trial of Hubway, which I'm very, very excited
Okay.
about, that's going to definitely put a strain on the roads. But at the same time, I also feel that at that point, cars, when there are more bicyclists, cars actually pay attention more. And I think that if in the last 6 months, I've really noticed more bicyclists, and I feel like I'm much more alert and taking more attention to, when you turn at stoplights. So is that helping at all, or do you think eventually it'll even out? The cars will be more aware of the bicyclists being on the road, or is it just people just don't pay attention ever? I don't want to be so negative, but
I think some people pay attention, and unfortunately, some don't. And
Yeah.
I think there's just a lot of traffic on, Somerville has got a level of traffic flowing on the roads that it was never designed for. There's
Yeah.
too many cars, there's too many bicycles, there's too many
we're
trucks. The
overflowing.
city was just never designed to handle, the infrastructure was laid out in the 1800s, and it's just not designed to handle it. And that's why, if people don't follow the rules, that's when people get hurt.
Right. So if I can go back, I'm going to bounce just a little bit here. Hayes, we've noticed that because of the increase of bicyclists in the city, we've noticed the city ratcheting up a little bit in terms of making it easier for bicyclists to leave their bikes in certain places, and they're
Okay.
called bike corrals.
Yes. The city has.
Initial reaction from the public.
The initial reaction from the public has been quite positive. So
Great.
what happened was last year we did a pilot project where we received a grant that was, well, actually not a grant, it's a program, they were purchased for us, through MAPC and the Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization, and they gave us these bike corrals, and we bought 3 and installed 2, and the reaction was great, so we went ahead and we received 7 more for a total of 10, with the idea being that we would install one in every major square or every ward in the city, which we have done.
And my understanding is that this is not the final location for some of these. If they work, terrific. If they don't work, we're going to move them around and find places where bicyclists actually need them.
Right, so we are monitoring them. We actually, as staff, transportation and infrastructure, one of our jobs is to go out and we count them at the same time every Thursday. And we will, as statisticians, come back and monitor whether or not at some places it would make sense to move them to where there's more demand. So yeah, we're staying tuned. But the
Okay.
idea was, in the first year, let's go ahead and try one in every square.
And
See how it goes.
I know that Hayes has gotten a lot of feedback, Sergeant Rooney, feedback through the force itself. I mean, we read the blogs, many of us read the blogs, and we hear the pushback that's coming from the public because of the placement of some of those corrals. They were put in front of, maybe a pizza place, or they were put improperly in a fire lane in Magoon Square. So all of that, because
right
it's
outside
now
the
been
right
hit.
outside my good saloon.
The corral itself has
That is
been
actually
hit.
not a fire lane.
No, it wasn't, because that was supposed to be outdoor seating at one
Yes.
point, and
Yeah.
didn't get
Well,
That's
I'm
why-
not going
okay,
to.
yes,
I'm not
okay,
going to
yes.
argue the point, but I'm going to make sure that the general public knows that the driveway that's in between the old Magoon Saloon and the CVS building is a fire lane,
Okay.
exit, and it's 95% owned by the city of Somerville. So my point was that the corral that was placed there was damaged by a vehicle within the first 2 weeks. So that's something that you're also going to be looking at. Did we
Certainly.
put this in the right place? But Sergeant Rooney, back to the question, Has the force received a lot of comments about these corrals through the general public?
I got to say, in the traffic unit, we have not. I mean, our function is investigating car crashes and enforcing the law, not the placement of bike corrals. So I've heard a little scuttlebutt around the city, but as far as the police department, no, we
Okay.
really haven't heard much.
Then one more quick question. I'm going to turn this over to Cayenne because I know she's got questions. Is it the intent of the police department to give citations to bicyclists first, or are you ticketing right off the bat for infractions?
We've been citing bicyclists for breaking the law, 8511B. We've been issuing them. We started on April 11th.
Okay.
I mean, I think 8511B covers a lot of things, and I think the portion of it that covers riding a bicycle in commercial districts, that is more something that needs to have more of a public information campaign where, I know where the commercial districts are, and there is some signage, but that might not be totally clear to somebody on a bicycle.
Okay.
So that part, we have kind of done a little, but not a lot. But as far as not stopping at a red light, not stopping at a stop sign, I mean, a red light is a red light, a stop sign is a stop sign. Everybody knows you're supposed to stop at a red light.
How many citations have you issued since the 11th?
The department has issued 87 citations to bicyclists for violating 8511B, but in the same time frame, we've issued a total of about 1,300 traffic citations total. So only, 80 to 90 out of the 1,300 have gone to bicyclists, the rest have gone to motorists, so.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is a question. I mean, it's just when you pull someone, because I actually someone I know got pulled over. So
Maybe by me?
It's very possible. She's probably watching this show. But anyway, do you? It was noted that. Do you require bicyclists? Obviously you don't, with a license, or you don't have to wear a helmet. That's not required, although it's recommended and strongly recommended
encouraged.
by the city and anyone, for that matter. But there was a comment about Section 11E, which states, if you observe a traffic violation, you are able to pull them over and ask them for their name and address. Is that true?
Well, if we observe a violation of 11B, which would be, red light,
Yep.
stop sign, a rule of the road being violated, we can stop the person, we can issue them a traffic citation for that violation. We can ask them to identify themselves. If 11E basically states if they out and out refuse to identify
Yeah.
themselves, if they say, I know we're on TV here, but F you, I'm not telling you who I am.
Yeah.
Or
Then-
they don't have identification
No,
on
no,
them.
that's a different case.
Okay.
I mean, we often stop motorists that left their driver's license at home. That in of itself is not an arrestable offense. But if a person just says, I'm not telling you who I am, go pound sand, we have a right of arrest. If they say, but if they are required to tell us who they are, the problem is we have
You
to
don't
take them
know
at-
if they're
we have to
being
take them at their
truthful.
word.
Right.
Although,
Okay.
as I have found, most people that we've stopped have a wallet on them, have identification. They give us identification readily, and it hasn't been really
Okay.
any confrontations. The only thing I would like to touch on, you mentioned about the helmet, and I'll just give you my little anecdote. A number of months ago, we had a traffic crash involving a kid that was hit on a bicycle on the street, and I was responding in as we investigate all the fatal
Yeah.
car crashes as well. And one of the officers was already on the scene, one of the crash investigators, and I called him on the cell phone to see what was going on, if he needed any additional resources, and I said to him, was the girl wearing a helmet, which she was required to under the law, a child under the age of 16 is supposed to wear a helmet, and he said to me, Sarge, if she was wearing a helmet, we wouldn't be talking. And I think
point.
that's the
Pretty
point I'd like to get
powerful, yeah.
across, is that kid got seriously hurt, and if she was wearing a helmet, it wouldn't have been a big deal, so.
Let's stay with children
Yes.
for a little bit. Children under the age of
16,
16 are required to wear helmets.
yes.
How much education are we doing through the public school system for bicycle safety? Is that something that we have, or we're looking at increasing?
Well, unfortunately, that's something we have done for years. We have the community police officers who teach bicycle safety in the schools. Up until a year ago or two, due to budget, the budget crisis that everybody knows about, we every year would get a grant from the state, a bicycle helmet grant, and we would give away 100 bike helmets to kids through the schools. And we've been doing that for years. And personally, I felt that when the bike law was enacted, the helmet law was enacted back in 1992, that's when it actually became law, I kind of thought it was going to be like hockey. When I was a kid, you still had most of the players in the NHL didn't wear helmets. You even had some goalies that didn't wear masks back then. But now, you don't get on the ice, whether
Without
you're
the
playing
helmet.
in the Pee-wees
Yeah.
or you're playing in the NHL, unless you're wearing a helmet. And I felt when they passed that helmet law in '92, I figured, after 20 or so years, we would be to the point that you wouldn't get on a bicycle unless you wore a helmet. And unfortunately, that is not the case. And I don't know what the problem is, what people don't get about it, but it's been on the books for 20 years, and still you see tons of kids and adults not wearing helmets.
Not wearing helmets, yeah.
I would say, though, that the Somerville City Schools, in combination with the police department and Shape Up Somerville, do have the Cycle Kids effort that happens for fifth graders, and that we're trying to expand to more kids. But it's a bicycle education program that's replicated throughout the state. And it's
Great.
very well thought of.
Great.
Well, I think the city has done its part. It's just, I just don't know why people just don't
Sergeant
seem to
Rooney,
get
you
it.
know as well as I do, sometimes people are just disinclined to change.
Yes.
So
Yes.
let's
We're creatures of habit, I guess.
Yeah, creatures of habit, and you're looking at a violator here that there are many
Oh.
times,
get the ticket out.
many times, as soon as I got past the Alewife T-stop on the community path, that the helmet came off, and off I went up to Bedford at a very high rate of speed until I got to Arlington Center. So that hasn't happened in a while. I'm going to make the commitment that I'm going to start wearing a helmet no matter what. I've made the commitment before, only for self-preservation, that if it comes between me and a vehicle, I'm going to defer to the vehicle. So, Cayenne.
It's not how many times you fall down, it's how many times you get back up. So we'll hope for the
True.
best.
So now I wanted to get back to a little bit to the future Hubway Share program that we're looking at doing a pilot program in Somerville, and I think Cambridge is doing it as well. Where you're placing these bicycle racks now, the 10 racks in all the different wards?
Okay.
It's
That
not,
is-
it's separate, right? I guess what I'm saying is because you were initially saying you were placing
Okay.
the bicycle, not the Hubway
Okay.
aside.
The
I was
corrals.
thinking
The corrals.
these bike racks were maybe in anticipation of seeing where the bike activity is more prevalent in the city to help that future pilot program. You're not, it's obviously very separate, it's not with the city, but I'm just curious if you can use, your statistics that you mentioned, which I find fascinating, of, pinpointing those areas in Somerville that would be best used for these Hubway Share programs. Are they all connected?
I would love to say that the corrals are connected. However, we deferred mostly to our historical bike count data, where we have evaluated intersections for their use. We know where the most traveled corridors are in Somerville. We also can see commute patterns throughout a greater system. And because of that, we know, or we think that we know,
Okay.
where anticipated demand is. But no, the corrals were kind of a separate
Okay.
deal. And there will be 8 Hubway stations that will launch. In fact, I came here from a Hubway meeting with Cambridge, Somerville, and Boston. And Brookline, and we're all getting very excited.
Great. So more
Yeah.
things coming.
Yes.
Somerville Bike Month, and I know that you've got a calendar here.
I'm cheating, yeah.
And it's showing multiple activities that are ongoing in the city of Somerville during the month of May. But in the anticipation of the summer months, when many, many more people get on their two-wheeled modes of transportation. We want to encourage you that bike safety is number one in the city of Somerville. And that not only goes for the bicyclists in the city, but pedestrians have to be cautious of the bicyclists when stepping off sidewalks. Motorists especially have to be cautious. Sergeant James Rooney, if you got one more thing to say to the bicycling public out there, what would you say to them?
Obey the law.
Thank you. I want to thank our guests today, Hayes Morrison from the City of Somerville Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, Sergeant James Rooney from the Somerville Police Department, and my co-host and avid bicyclist, Cayenne Anderson from Greater Somerville. Thank you very much for joining us for this special edition. Stay tuned, stay safe, stay informed.